Symbolism of Boxing and Black Leather. The global practice of white supremacy encompasses all patterns of symbols, logic, thought, speech, action, and emotional response in all areas of people activity. For those self-defined as white, therefore, the system of global white supremacy can be most readily understood as a survival system, a system based upon the facts of the global white numerical minority status, white genetic recessiveness, and white genetic vulnerability. It is also important to comprehend that it is a fear system, a system that is consciously or unconsciously aware of its genetic vulnerability and fearful of its genetic annihilation. Like the symbols discussed in preceding chapters, the sport of boxing, in the white supremacy system and culture, is yet another instance of specific behavioral and object symbolism that manifests the collective white concern of its genetic vulnerability. Much of the motivation to write this essay came from the heavyweight boxing championship fight between Larry Holmes, the undefeated black champion, and Jerry Cooney, the #1 white contender and subsequent loser. Race was the major and overriding concern in this contest, with Cooney portrayed as the white hope. The real fight took place with the atmosphere created by the series of Rocky movies. In these fantasies, Sylvester Stallone plays the white fighter in the red, white, and blue trunks, who is always victorious over his black challenger. Encyclopedia Britannica states, "Boxing is the art of attack and defense with the fists in which the two contestants wear padded gloves, box bouts of 3 to 15 rounds, and generally observe the code set forth in the Marquis of Queensberry rules. Contestants are matched in weight and ability, each trying to land hard and often with his own fists, and to avoid the blows of his opponent. The term pugilism and prize fighting in 20th century usage are practically synonymous with boxing, though the first indicates the ancient origins of the sport and its derivation from the Latin pugil, a fighter with the cestus related to the Latin pugnus, fist, and derived in turn from the Greek pix, with clenched fist, while prize fighting emphasizes the pursuit of the sport for gain. Samuel Johnson in his dictionary defined a prize fighter as one that fights publicly for a reward. Of the history of boxing, Encyclopedia Britannica continues. There is evidence that boxing existed in ancient Crete, where a civilization was established by about 1500 BC. Centuries before the arrival of the Greeks, boxing was known in the Aegean. In the early days, fighters wore thongs of soft leather bound around their fists and 2/3 of the way up their forearms to protect hands and wrists. Beginning in the 4th century BC, harder leather was used for the thongs, with the result that they became weapons as well as protection. And finally, late in the history of the Roman Empire, the Greeks adopted the hand covering called cestus, which was studded with iron or brass nuggets and was used in battles to the death in the Roman arenas. The first Greek fighters were not paid. Glory was the only reward they sought. Later, wealthy men trained their slaves as boxers and had them perform for special entertainments. In the last century AD, Romans forced cestus-clad slaves to bludgeon one another to death in a gruesome perversion of sport for the entertainment of crowds who thronged to arenas to see the kill. With the rise of Christianity and the concurrent decline of the Roman Empire, pugilism as entertainment apparently ceased to exist. At least there is no record of it. In more modern times, with the rise of London as a major city in the 17th and 18th centuries, prize fighting became a major sport there, the sport being bare-knuckle in character. Bill Richmond, an American-born former slave, became the first man born in America to win a claim in England as a first-class pugilist. Tom Cribb, the Englishman, is considered the first to win immortality in the sport of boxing. Cribb beat Richmond in 90 minutes in 1805. Later, after winning the English championship, he twice beat Tom Molyneux, another American-born former slave, in what were considered Cribb's greatest performances. As evidenced by the above, ethnic and racial considerations have long been a major theme in boxing. The first man considered a scientific fighter is described as an English Jew named Daniel Mendoza. Other fighters remained associated with their ethnic and/or national origins. The waves of immigrants that came to America from the British Isles and Europe, all coming to America competing with one another for advancement, produced not only outstanding fighters identified as Jews, but others identified as Italian, German, Scandinavian, Polish, American Negroes, and foreign-born Negroes. Of course, the only group against which there was great prejudice at times was against the black fighters, who presently dominate the ring in all weight categories. Amateur boxing began during the 19th century in Britain. In 1888, the Amateur Athletic Union of the United States was founded. In 1923, the Chicago Tribune newspaper founded an amateur competition called the Golden Gloves. The name, Golden Gloves, was first used in New York in 1927. It has now grown into a national competition rivaling the AAU. Although boxing as a sport is now worldwide, there is no accepted world ruling body for professional boxing. Each country has its own rules, and in the US, each state has different rules. Most common, however, is that the bouts take place in a ring, which is in reality an area 14 to 20 feet square, surrounded by 3 strands of ropes. Professional bouts are from 4 to 15 rounds in duration. Key to this discussion is the general rule that disqualification may be made by the referee during a fight for fouls, such as hitting below the belt, an imaginary line drawn across the body from the top of the hip bone. There are other rules for disqualification, but the above usually is recognized as the most crucial rule. Also significant for this discussion is the central aspect of technique that dictates the gloved. Hands must be held up in front of the body, the left hand shoulder high and extended about 12 inches. The left hand is slightly higher than the right, with the left forearm held across the chest, right fist almost touching it, and both elbows bent and resting lightly against the ribs. The right fist is held close to the chin for protection and tucked into the chest, and the shoulders are hunched. Whereas the above sets forth the specifics of the formal boxing match, it is the specific symbolism and the symbolic elements in the behavior of boxing that are the major concern. Awareness at the level of the symbol and the symbolic enables us to comprehend a more significant meaning of the dynamics of the world around us. Essentially, to the extent that the surrounding reality is not understood at the deeper levels, at the level of the symbolic, the individual and the collective remain relatively powerless. Symbols and symbolic activity impact at subconscious and unconscious levels of the brain-computer, escaping conscious-level screening and control over the behavioral outflow that has been stimulated by the symbol and the symbolic. With in-depth understanding, the symbol and the symbolic can be decoded and made available for conscious use and disposal, increasing the individual's power over the self and the surrounding environment. Decoding the symbols and the symbolic behaviors in boxing requires returning in time to ancient Africa, the birthplace of human beings, and more specifically to the African country called Egypt, in the period antedating the invasions by the white tribes of Europe. The most important Egyptian god was Osiris, referred to as Lord of the Perfect Black, which I interpret as a reference to his skin color. The symbol by which Osiris was known was the black bull called APIs. Jussieu-Lo's Dictionary of Symbols refers to the bull as the historic symbol of white superiority over black. However, this seems to be a conscious or unconscious attempt by Sirlot to reverse the meaning of the bull symbol, since the black bull was the symbol of Osiris, a black god. Thus, in actuality, the bull must represent the opposite, black superiority over white in the psyche of the white collective. Moving forward in time, the sport of bullfighting became prominent on the continent of Europe. In Spain, shortly after the Moors, who had conquered Spain for 700 years, were finally beaten and chased back into Africa. Of course, by that time, the skin color and hair of the peoples in Spain and in southern Europe had darkened because of the dominant black genetic material which the Africans brought with them. However, the Spaniard response to being conquered by the Africans following the military, but not the genetic defeat of the latter, was to begin the obsessive symbolic ritual of bullfighting. A male person dressed in a suit of lights daringly prances and parades in front of a black bull, and finally, with the help of several others, kills the bull. The fighter then normally takes as souvenir the bull's ear or tail, both of which have been recognized as phallic symbols. Further, the bull is often eaten and its testicles, seen as giving power to the diner, are consumed as a delicacy. Following the Civil War in the U.S., a country whose development was based upon the slave labor of blacks captured from the continent of Africa, the bull steer again takes on major significance. The victory in that war went to the North, the South, and the slaveholders lost the war. They also lost their black slaves through the emancipation process. Many of the white ex-slaveholders moved westward, initially, wantonly slaughtering the massive herds of black and dark brown buffalo. The indigenous inhabitants of America, who are incorrectly referred to as Indians, called the black soldiers buffalo soldiers. The source of this terminology likely stems from the similarities. The hair on the head of the buffalo is very curly, like the helix hair on the heads of the Africans. Thus, these white cowboys and soldiers were slaughtering the symbols of Osiris, the black god, and symbols of the blacks. Once the buffalo were removed from the plains, in addition to the so-called Indians who were also killed, these whites began to raise cattle. For the most part, these cattle have been brown and black in coloration. The superior cattle, the Angus, is mostly all black. Even more interesting is the fact that the whites who raised, bred, and herded brown and black cattle referred to themselves as cowboys, a highly interesting word which doubly effeminates these males. The word cow, while it can be used broadly to refer to any domesticated boyine, is used most specifically to refer to the mature female cattle. Similarly, the word boy historically has been used by whites in the U.S. to refer to the black male as a means of minimizing and degrading his masculinity. These cowboys, nonetheless, throw ropes around the necks of brown and black cattle, and they also castrated the cattle-producing steer. Cattle raising and cattle herding operated under the ostensible purpose of producing beef for eating. The U.S. has become one of the major beef-eating nations in the world, with its favored means being steak and hamburgers. Beef is the preferred meat of the majority of whites in the global white supremacy system and culture. Beef eaters are supposed to be, or to become, more powerful and more masculine. Cattle were also put to other uses, mainly the production of leather for shoes, gloves, clothes, luggage, etc. The wearing of leather, particularly black leather, is supposed to make one appear maximally masculine and powerful. Leathers are used in the production of many articles of clothing for the military. The German military in the Second World War, perhaps, exceeded all other white supremacy forces in the utilization of black leather to give the appearance of power and might. As a result of the aforementioned facts, the black bull and its symbolic uses, clothing and food, have come to demonstrate the power that was originally seen in Osiris. The sport of boxing assumes the same theme of power. In this specific instance, the theme is expressed through the use of the leather-gloved fists, continuing a practice begun in the days of the Roman Empire. In current times, the fists of the boxer are covered by rounded, padded, colored leather boxing gloves. These paired gloves, poised together in front of the body at the beginning of the fight, are symbols of the genetic material containing skin-covered testicles, the containers of the true power of the man, the genetic essence. The poised fists are in direct parallel alignment with the testicles below the belt. The critical off-limits body area, which the boxer is penalized for striking, is the area of the testicles or genitals, below the belt. Of course, this body area restriction in the boxing match is to prevent serious pain and bodily damage. However, it also is necessary to prevent the conscious association of the symbol with the true objects whose power is really being contested, the genetic power residing in the testicles. It is as though the below-the-belt restriction states the testicles have nothing whatsoever to do with this contest. In reality, however, the contest is only about the genetic power of the testicles. Some investigators also view the paired feet as symbols of the testicles that are in parallel alignment above them. This awareness contributes to a deeper understanding of the foot and the shoe fetishes seen in the global white supremacy system culture. Returning to the boxing arena, the symbolic contest of the genetic power of the testicles is staged in a ring. It is referred to as a ring because it is symbolic of the female vaginal orifice. The bout also takes place on canvas, typically considered white in color. In the recent Holmes-Cooney fight, the canvas was colored red, white, and blue. This is significant because these three colors, red, white, and blue, are the most important symbolic colors in the white supremacy system and culture, as manifested by the colors of the flags of the majority of white nation-states. The flag on a pole symbolizes the lateral view of the phallus and the testicles, the colored cloth representing the testicles. A red, white, and blue cloth symbolizes genetic material that produces white skin, through which can be seen red arterioles and blue veins. Hence the expression blue bloods, a phrase which means that the skin is white or pale enough for the blue veins to show through. Blue veins and arterioles typically are not visible through melanin-pigmented skins. Additionally, in Rocky, Stallone wears red, white, and blue trunks that are designed to symbolize the American flag. The trunks cover the genitals, and, in this instance, genitals that produce white skin through which red arterioles and blue veins can be seen. Finally, in regards to the boxing match, the gloved fists typically are covered with black, brown, or other colored leather, as opposed to white leather. This fact reveals that, at the deep levels of the white individual and collective psyche, power is thought to be associated with color as opposed to colorless skin. In the final analysis, it does not matter which boxer is the winner at the surface level. The color of the gloves of the winner are always non-white, and the white fighter who dons colored gloves simply identifies himself with the power and color of the bull of Osiris, which is black, not white. Thus, color is always the winner at the deeper levels of the psyche, just as in reality black is always genetically dominant to white. Additional support for my thesis is found in an article entitled MD Describes Fisting as Caring Sexual Practice in Psychiatric News of the American Psychiatric Association, June 18, 1982. The article reports on the work of Thomas Lowry, MD, Chief of the Psychiatry Department at the Kaiser Permanente Medical Center in Vallejo, California, and Gregory Williams, an occupational therapist living in San Francisco. Lowry created the term brachioproctic eroticism to describe the practice known as fisting. The article states, "The ultimate closeness and the ecstatic and total trust are just two of the phrases used by participants to describe their feelings during a sexual practice that, although bizarre and seemingly unlikely, is apparently engaged in by a sizable number of persons. This practice consists of one person inserting his or her hand and forearm into the rectum of another. In the first phase of their study, Lowry and Williams distributed questionnaires at leather bars, homosexual conventions, specialty nightclubs, bookstores, and doctors' consulting rooms. From these data, the authors estimate that, nationwide, roughly 50,000 persons have incorporated fisting into their regular sexual repertoires. The study is reported by Lowry and Williams in the January 1981 issue of the British Journal of Sexual Medicine and was presented by Lowry at the March 1982 annual meeting of the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. The mean age of the respondents was 34.1 years, and their major occupational groups included professionals, businessmen, skilled laborers, and unskilled laborers. 96% stated that they were exclusively or predominantly homosexual. There is deep-level symbolism involved in fisting, a practice that represents a form of clinical pathology of the self-concept and self-image. It is directly related to the above translation of the symbolism inherent in boxing, wherein the fist becomes symbolic of the testicles. Chapter 6 explains that male homosexuality is based upon the conscious and/or unconscious sense of male substance deficiency. This results in the highly symbolic and behavioral preoccupation with the internalization, at one or the other end of the gastrointestinal tract, of male substance in the form of semen. Lowry and Williams reveal that there is an increasing number of persons, the vast majority of whom are exclusively or predominantly homosexual, who, in response to a deep sense of male substance deficiency, are motivated to have the fist and forearm of another inserted into the anal end of the gastrointestinal tract. For greater clarity, the fist and forearm in abstract form constitute a ball at the end of a rod or stick. This abstract diagrammatic form resembles the lateral view of the male genitalia. The questionnaires for the data collected by Lowry and Williams were distributed in leather bars, along with other places frequented by homosexuals. Leather bars are settings where mostly white male homosexuals dress in black leather and/or engage in various forms of sadomasochistic sexual activity involving the use of black leather. Having a leather whip inserted into the rectum is one form of symbolically internalizing not only male substance but more specifically black male substance. Being beaten by a whip or being dominated by someone dressed in black leather are other symbolic forms of internalizing black male substance through the act of submission. The wearing of leather and the preoccupation with the use of leather objects, including boxing gloves, is the subconscious and unconscious return, through symbolism, to the white collective's perception of the dominant genetic power of the black male. Therefore, for men who consciously and/or unconsciously sense themselves as deficient in male substance, to act out symbolically and to don or to internalize symbols representative of the highest standard of male power, blackness, is logically correct, if not logically necessary.